The world turned black in an instant, a cruel explosion of fire and chaos that stole the light from our eyes and the breath from our lungs. It was a summer evening, the kind where the air hums with warmth and the promise of tomorrow, but for Leela and me, tomorrow became a shadow we could no longer see. The attackers came without warning, masked figures wielding rage and destruction, their motives lost in the haze of our pain. They left us broken, blind, and clinging to the fragments of a life we'd built together. But this isn't a story of loss. It's a story of what grew in the darkness, of a love that refused to die, and of a miracle that bloomed where despair should have won. This is the story of how we, two blind parents, brought a child into a world we could no longer see, and how that child became our light. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the power of the human spirit, please hit that like button, drop a comment, share this story with someone who needs it, and subscribe to Kindness Speaks. Your support helps us share stories that remind the world of hope and resilience. Leela and I were high school sweethearts, the kind of couple everyone envied but never quite understood. She was the artist, her hands always smudged with charcoal or paint, her laughter bright enough to make even the gloomiest days feel like spring. I was the dreamer, always chasing the next big idea, my head in the clouds but my heart tethered to her. We married young, at 22, in a small backyard ceremony with fairy lights and homemade vows. Our life was simple, a tiny apartment in a quiet town, a shared dream of opening an art studio where Leela could teach and I could manage the books. We weren't rich, but we were happy, and we had plans. Plans for a family, for a house with a garden, for a future painted in the colors of our love. That summer evening, we were walking home from the local diner, hands clasped, talking about baby names even though we hadn't yet started trying. The air smelled of honeysuckle, and the stars were just beginning to peek through the dusk. Then the world exploded. The attack was senseless, a random act of violence that swept through our small town like a storm. A group of strangers, driven by some unknown fury, set fires, shattered windows, and tore through lives without mercy. Leela and I were caught in the blast of a makeshift explosive, thrown to the ground as heat and debris rained down. I remember the searing pain, the deafening roar, and then, nothing. Darkness, not the kind that comes with closing your eyes, but a heavy, unyielding void that swallowed everything. When I woke in the hospital, the doctors' voices were soft but brutal. The explosion had damaged our optic nerves beyond repair. Leela and I were permanently blind. The world we'd known, her paintings, my spreadsheets, the way her eyes crinkled when she smiled, was gone. We were 25, married 3 years, and now we faced a life where sight was a memory. The weeks that followed were a blur of grief and disorientation. The hospital discharged us to a rehabilitation center, where we learned to navigate a world we couldn't see. Holding a cane felt like admitting defeat, each tap against the floor a reminder of what we'd lost. Leela, always the stronger one, tried to keep us grounded. She'd hum old songs while we practiced walking with our canes, her voice a lifeline in the dark. But at night, when the world was quiet, I'd hear her cry softly into her pillow, and my heart would break all over again. We were angry, at the attackers who were never caught, at the universe for letting this happen, at ourselves for not knowing how to move forward. Our families rallied around us, but their pity was a weight we couldn't bear. Friends drifted away, unsure how to talk to us now that we were different. The dream of the art studio faded, replaced by the daunting task of relearning how to live. How to pour coffee without spilling it. How to cross a street without dying. How to love each other when we couldn't see the person we'd promised to love forever. The hardest part wasn't the blindness itself, it was the fear that our dreams were dead. Leela and I had always wanted children, but now the idea felt impossible. How could we raise a child when we couldn't see to change a diaper, to catch a toddler before they fell, to read a bedtime story? The world wasn't kind to people like us, or so it seemed. Social workers warned us about the challenges, their voices dripping with concern that felt like judgment. It's not impossible, one said, but it will be hard. Very hard. Those words haunted us, planting seeds of doubt that grew in the quiet moments. Leela would sit for hours, her hands tracing the edges of her old sketchbooks, as if she could feel the colors she'd once painted. I'd listen to audiobooks about parenting, trying to imagine a life where we could be enough. But the fear was relentless, a shadow that followed us everywhere. What if we failed? What if our child suffered because of us? What if love wasn't enough? Then came the day that changed everything. Leela had been quieter than usual, her hands fidgeting in a way I'd learned to recognize as nervousness. We were in our new apartment, a small, accessible space our families had helped us furnish. The air smelled of the lavender candles she loved, and the hum of the refrigerator was the only sound breaking the silence. She took my hand, her fingers trembling, and pressed it to her stomach. "I'm pregnant," she whispered. The words hit me like a wave, pulling me under and lifting me up all at once. Pregnant. A baby. Our baby. Joy and terror collided in my chest, and I pulled her close, feeling her heartbeat against mine. We cried together, not out of sadness but out of something bigger, a fierce, fragile hope. We didn't know how we'd do it, but we knew we wanted this child. We wanted to be parents, to give this baby a life filled with the love we still had, even if the world had taken so much else. The pregnancy was a journey through uncharted territory. Blindness made every step a challenge. Leela couldn't see the ultrasound images, couldn't watch her belly grow, but she felt every kick, every flutter, and described them to me with a poet's precision. I learned to see our baby through her words, through the warmth of her skin under my hands. We attended classes for blind parents, fumbling through diaper-changing practice with dolls and laughing when we got it wrong. The instructors were patient, teaching us to rely on touch, sound, and instinct. We adapted, learning to measure formula by weight, to recognize our baby's cries by their pitch, to create a home where safety was built into every corner. But the doubts lingered. Strangers' comments stung, whispers in grocery stores about how brave we were, as if our decision to have a child was reckless. Family members worried openly, offering to move in, to help. Their love was real, but it carried an undercurrent of disbelief that we could do this alone. Leela and I clung to each other, promising to prove them wrong, to prove to ourselves that we were enough. As Leela's due date approached, the suspense was unbearable. We'd prepared as best we could. Our apartment was a fortress of organization, with everything labeled in Braille, every surface safe for tiny hands. But the fear of the unknown loomed large. What if something went wrong during the birth? What if we couldn't keep up with a newborn's needs? The night Leela went into labor, I felt the world tilt again, the same disorientation I'd felt after the explosion. We made it to the hospital, guided by a kind nurse who described everything as it happened. Leela was a warrior, her strength a force I could feel even without seeing her face. I held her hand, counting her breaths, whispering words of love as she brought our daughter into the world. When the nurse placed the tiny, squirming bundle in my arms, I felt her warmth, her weight, her life. We named her Aurora, after the dawn we'd never see but could feel in her every breath. Aurora's first year was a tapestry of triumphs and struggles. Sleepless nights were harder when we couldn't see the clock, but we learned to sense her rhythms, her hungry cries, her sleepy sighs. Leela's hands became her eyes, mapping Aurora's face with a tenderness that made my heart ache. I discovered I could soothe her with songs, my voice a bridge between us. We made mistakes, spilled bottles, missed cues, but we learned. Social workers checked in, their skepticism softening as they saw our love in action. Neighbors, once distant, became allies, offering to read mail or describe Aurora's expressions. Slowly, the world that had felt so hostile began to shift. We weren't just surviving, we were building something beautiful. Aurora's laughter filled our home, a sound brighter than any light we'd lost. She was our miracle, proof that life could grow in the darkest places. Looking back, I see how far we've come. The attackers took our sight, but they couldn't take our spirit. Leela and I found a new way to see. Through touch, through sound, through the love that binds us to Aurora. Our life isn't what we planned, but it's ours, and it's enough. We're not heroes, we're just two people who refused to let go of hope. Aurora is 3 now, a whirlwind of curiosity and joy, and every day she teaches us that love doesn't need eyes to see. We're still learning, still fumbling, but we're a family, and that's more than we ever dared to dream after the darkness came. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you of the power of love and resilience, please take a moment to like, comment, and share this video. Subscribe to Kindness Speaks and join us in spreading stories that inspire. Your engagement means the world to us and helps others find hope in their own darkness. Before we end, we'd love to hear from you. In the comments below, share what this story meant to you or a time when you found light in a dark moment. Your stories keep this community alive.